So I'm really excited about this chat today. I have the opportunity to have Namrata Sudhindra sit with me. She is a yoga teacher in Bangalore and has been teaching yoga for, how long have you been teaching yoga for, Namrata?
16, I mean, my 16th year.
16th year. And she's practiced yoga in New York as well. And being a yoga teacher here in the West, we're both of us originally South Asian, but I teach here, and being in the West, it's been an interesting learning experience. And I thought it would be so wonderful to sit down and chat with Namrata and just compare notes and learn from each other as to what the state of yoga is in the present time. How are you, Namrata?
I'm really good, Tanya. I'm so excited that we're doing this.
So you said you've been studying yoga for 16 years, and you had the good fortune of meeting my teacher Shiva Ray in Rishikesh. Tell me a little bit about that.
In Rishikesh, there's this beautiful ashram called the Parmarth Ashram, which started an international yoga festival. And Sadhvi, who works with Swamiji at the ashram, is from America. And so there were a lot of Californian teachers who would come to this festival. It used to be a beautiful 7 days, by the Ganga. We lived on the ashram. That's where I met Shivari, actually. And we did a beautiful Shivratri morning practice on the banks of the Ganga. It's something I'll never forget.
I've always found her to be a very magical being. And I've practiced with different yoga teachers over here. And I don't know, there's just something about her. She's the genuine article.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an aura to her that is pure, it's radiant, it draws you in. And it's like a little loving embrace, right? All her classes.
Now, what are the most outstanding things in your mind when you take a yoga class here in New York as compared to yoga the way you teach it in Bangalore?
I think what the West contributed to the practice of yoga, which was great, was bringing in details of how they broke things down, right? And maybe that comes from like the gymnastic background, or I think that's something that's so consistently done in schools there. My first experience of a yoga class that really shocked me in New York was, I don't know if it's fair to mention where I went, because it's, again, quite a cult-like school, right? And lots of followers. And I had practiced. They were also some of the teachers that had come to Rishikesh. And that's when I learned of the style first. And when I was staying, the studio was right around the corner. So I had to take advantage of it, and I went. And this conversation begins about spirituality and how this is so much more and so much deeper. And right in the middle of class, before we begin, a fire was set up, right? Which is almost like equivalent to how we would do arti here, but we do arti for gods and goddesses, right? Anyway, and then the fire was taken from person to person as like a cleansing process. And there was a lot of chanting. And I think that was the only class that I went to, which I left from saying, okay, that was too much for my Indian sense.
I mean, this is such a valuable little skit story anecdote, because I have found that there's a lot of reverence for the Devis and the Devtas, and they bring a lot of spirituality into a yoga class. The Western teachers do, and sometimes it feels as if it's very textbookish. It's stuff you've read in a textbook, and you're sort of regurgitating it, and sometimes you can really sense that there is a desire to make that connection and to channel the goddess or the god, and teach a class. But in your classes, usually, what is the significance, and how much of religion do you bring into your classes usually, or in classes in India?
My classes, none at all. I mean, it's a whole different experience here, right? Because India is, like, we have religion around us all the time. we're a society that's really deeply entrenched in it. And I feel like that way yoga brings you to a space where it's equal. Like, I don't need to bring in these references. If you need that in your life, there are plenty of avenues that will offer that to you. Like, currently we're in festival season here, and almost every 15 days there's something that comes up. And depending on the family that you're raised in, there are pujas that we do at home anyway. And so there's a very clear distinction between the two, especially for me and the kind of students that I interact with. So we don't see that happen here so much. But traditionally, if you go into ashram type setting, you would find a bit of overlap based on where you land up, whether it's the Vivekananda school, the Shivananda school. All of them will do satsangs in the evening, right? You could even land up at Art of Living, Isha Foundation, anywhere. And there are satsangs that will happen. And it's really based on which school that you land up at.
I always felt my meditation teacher, Lauren Roche, he lived in India for a long time, and he was, the text that he's translated is from the Bhairava Tantra. And I feel like he's one of those as well, who's a genuine article. And he always said that if you can't pronounce the words, and if the mantra doesn't speak to you from a very authentic place, then speak something that is authentic to you. And there's a lot of mispronunciation of Sanskrit words and even asana names that happens in yoga classes over here. And I suppose for the non-discerning student, it's okay. But for me, having grown up in Pakistan and listened to Hindi, I've heard Hindi, I come from a Sindhi family. We have a lot of words in our language that are Sanskrit, have roots in Sanskrit. So it doesn't land very softly. Sometimes I'm like, well, there was no reason to bring in so much spirituality and religion. It's a yoga class. I mean, one can have moments of it infused, but then having entire themes sometimes feels a bit like it's maybe a desperation to bring God into the class, because unlike what you have in India, there is not the presence of God in the West that much.
Yeah.
And
sure.
the need and the hunger to find that within class is probably the reason why there is so much of that over here. And I've also encountered students who feel like they will go to India and they will find God in India. How do you as an Indian feel when you hear things like that?
I kind of like it, because India is it's such a beautifully chaotic, crazy, colorful, mystical country. And there are so many spots within our country that are truly divine. There's been such concentrated energy in so many places, because they're places of worship, and people have been coming there. And when you pour in that level of positivity into a place over, like, centuries, there is a certain charge in that place, and you're going to feel it and experience it. I don't know, like, what the long-term impact of that would be.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point, because that's why we practiced yoga, and that's why we call it a practice. It's something that you do repeatedly. And similarly, if you found that sense of wholeness, or you found that sense of peace, it's something you have to work on. It's not something that, you had a moment of it and you'll be enlightened for the rest of your life. It's something that we have to keep working towards and seeking.
And based on where life is taking you, you're going to have your own highs and lows, and moments when you are so dedicated and committed to that practice and you're getting all of this goodness out of it, and then moments when you have absolutely no inclination, drive to even roll your mat out. And it happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to teach a yoga class here in New York, how would you alter your practice from the way you teach it presently in India?
I don't think I would alter it too much. I feel like it would be a different approach, and it would be nice for them to experience what an Indian yoga teacher has to offer. I always start the class with the Oms. I always end class with the Oms. There is pranayama that I do with every class. Sure, we do asana practice, but my traditional Hatha yoga classes are always going to be in the same format, right? You're going to start with your Surya Namaskar, you're going to do your standing postures, you'll do your balance postures, you'll come down onto your mat, you'll still do some, seated postures, some twists, you'll invert and you'll end. Like
Yeah.
that format. There's a reason that you do things in that format. And um, I would still teach it like that. Like I would be more traditional in my class approach if I were to teach in the West and
Yeah,
keep
that's
it connected to the roots here.
interestingly, I don't see a lot of Indian students in yoga classes here. I mean, I have a few here and there, and I always make fun. I always joke with them, and I always say, "Why is it that the Indian kids don't come to yoga?" And they're like, "We kind of just take it for granted."
Absolutely. I think we still continue to take it for granted here. It's certainly changing in the cities. It's a lot more open, but it means different things to different people.
Yeah,
And going to a studio and doing yoga 3 times a week might not be something that appeals to everybody. It
totally.
could be something that they just do at home, and it could be their meditation and pranayama practice. They might not necessarily want that whole asana focused hour. But
Totally.
it's
And it
definitely
makes
changing.
perfect sense. Yeah.
We are churning yoga teachers out by, I mean, dozen is like an understatement. It's such a big booming business.
It is. And actually, that's one of the things I also came across when I spoke to a couple of students who went for their yoga teacher training in India. Some of them came back saying that, look, it's really commercial over there. I thought I was going to go for all the spirituality and I'll be, in Rishikesh by the Ganges and so, but it was really commercial and it's a pretty big business. And there's that feeling as well. That's pretty predominant for a lot of students.
How much is the wellness industry valued at? I remember reading this at some point. It was a couple $100 billion.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely.
We're
It's
all like, at the end of the day, it's not like yoga teachers don't need to make money. I think that's the other big issue in India is, and it's still very, very slowly changing. But a lot of people seem to think that yoga's from here, and we've been doing it for so long that why does it cost so much?
yeah, sure. The wellness industry is a trillion-dollar industry, but what about the yoga teachers? So what is that dynamic looking like in India right now? Because it's true, why should the yoga teachers, the people providing that wellness, not be making a decent living and doing what they love doing? Is it a challenge for you as well over there?
I think it was when I started, because I was also at the very beginning of this, the yoga trend, and it was before it became such a buzzword. I don't feel that anymore. I feel like, I'm established here. I've been doing this for a really long time. People understand why they come to me. They know the kind of journey that I've been on myself, and I'm and any yoga teacher who's been doing this for a while knows this, right? We constantly update where we are because things are changing, and it's part of how we grow as well in our own practice, right? So you go away for a month or whatever it is that you can do, and all of that is an investment in our business as well. And so it's not going to come to you at this uh, very discounted rate. Like, why should it? That would then mean that I'm not respecting or appreciating the effort and energy that goes into what I'm doing.
I do want to talk about the concept of the guru, which has gotten so, it's given really good teachers a bad name as well, because there are some really genuine, authentic teachers who are really living their dharma. They're really passing on the lineage, they're passing on the wisdom. And then there's people like Bikram or, the documentary on Osho on Netflix. Although they were both brilliant men, they're both, brilliant, but somewhere along the way, This element, do you encounter that a lot yourself or not so much? Or
Um,
are you just careful of it?
Personally or in general in India?
Both.
Personally, I'm not drawn to that whole concept, right? I think, uh, and I'm not saying that in a way that I don't think that, that someone will not show up in my life who, will be, would, could massively change everything for me. I'm not closed up to that idea, but I don't necessarily believe that you should find this one person and then put them up on this pedestal and then lose all sense of logic and reasoning. It's not something that I have experienced on a very deep level. I have met plenty of gurus. I have deep respect for a lot of them. I definitely connect to a lot of their teachings, and I take what appeals to me. Having said that, there are a lot. It's a growing trend here in the yoga space. Um, I haven't directly seen it happen, but I hear a lot of stories that come back to me from teachers who've experienced it, or um, students who have gone to them and felt so lost and almost given up on the practice of yoga, and by chance have come into a class of mine and felt really different about enjoying the practice. And there is that slight god complex, I guess, right? And they've begun to play part counselor, part I'll fix your life, come with me on this retreat. And, there is that stuff going on here as well.
I
I
guess
don't,
for a student, it's important to just learn to discern. And unfortunately, the only way we really learn to discern is when we've actually gone through the fire. It's like trial by fire. You have to be burnt in the process to know that, no, this is not what I
not,
need.
yeah.
Because people can warn you about a lot of different teachers, but sometimes you'll be surprised that certain teachers may really speak to you. They may not appeal to your friend, but they may appeal to you. So it's very hard to say.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
it's also dependent on the time in your life that you're meeting this person, right? As is quite evident if you watch that Bikram documentary. A lot of these women, when they met Bikram, were very vulnerable, were going through a lot of their own internal turmoil, whether it was, relationship based or, whatever it might have been, and uh, put their faith in this man to fix them somehow.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, look, I think that people are always seeking help. That's just, and we're so often in our lives at those crossroads where we need a little guidance. But it's so important for the teacher to be that light worker, to not have the God complex and say, oh yeah, I can save your soul if you do my bidding. It's more about guiding that person out of that swamp that they find themselves in, or at least giving them a few keys and letting them figure it out. But what happens, unfortunately, is that a lot of these gurus take on a very predatorial stance, and then they feast on these very vulnerable people going through this vulnerable phase in their lives. So I think the onus is on the teacher, I feel, which is why ultimately, you're answerable for your own actions. You're accountable to your own conscience.
I know you're deeply into the Sufi culture, Sufism, and I'd love to hear more about that. Like, how did you get into it? How much of it do you bring into your practice, into your teachings?
Namrata, Sufism is something that I bring into my life. So it's kind of like yoga, and I'm so blessed that I have these two. I call them mothers, the mother yoga and Sufism as a mother, because to me they're so essentially feminine. They're so nurturing in their essence. Um, why I was drawn to Sufism was because I have been someone who's always wanted God in my life. Sufism in particular, because the profound and immediate message of Sufism was love. That God is love. Whatever your idea of God is, it's love. and it's vibrating at the same frequency as love. So that was my addiction. That was my love for Sufism. And for me, it's been seamless. Drawing from yoga, drawing from Sufism, then having a teacher who has studied Tantra so deeply, the scripture. He translates Sanskrit into English, being under his tutelage for more than 10 years. And then coming from South Asia. I mean,
Yeah.
growing up in Pakistan, which was part of India. So we're so informed by the land, the geography of where we are, that for me, weaving these modalities was completely seamless. Yoga speaks to me in so many ways, and it resonates so much with what Sufism teaches me as well.
How do you bring them together in your class? I'm so curious to do a class with you.
It is definitely the essence. I can't say I do any ritual or I even om in class, but I think that because not that I try to make my classes a-religious, my classes are very strong in their spiritual tone. A lot of my students have felt that, have stuck around because those who are drawn to that spirituality come to it. But I think that the way that it weaves in is probably the tenderness that comes through, which doesn't mean my asana is tender all the time.
That I've seen your videos. I know it's a strong practice. It's just uh, it comes down to the same thing about what you were saying. It's that union of your body, breath, mind, spirit. And if it's coming from a place like you're describing in the way you're teaching it, it's it's not possible to be in this class and not feel that.
Yeah.
No, I feel like for the most of it, I cocoon myself in my little bubble, in my little yoga bubble, and almost not engage with the reality of where I live. But every now and then you snap out of that and you do that and you understand why you need this bubble. I did this 3 days ago. I made the mistake of watching the news.
Yeah.
It's a mockery.
This is happening globally. I mean, this is when you turn on the news in Pakistan or you turn on the news in America, they're all vibrating at the lowest common denominator. The frequency at which the news is vibrating, the kind of information that they are focusing on is appalling. They're not interested in educating people. They're just interested in sensationalizing so they can all make money.
It is so sad. Yeah,
And
no.
whatever you need to do to protect the sanctity of your emotional world and your spiritual world and your mind, you should do whatever it takes. And yeah, that means we have to live in a bubble. But if from that bubble you can affect other people and help other people, why not?
And I feel like it won't be possible to do the amount of work that we do if we didn't have that bubble. Because it is energy work, even if it's happening online right now. It's a whole different level of energy work.
I love chatting with you, Namrata. This was so great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tanya. And I had such a great time talking to you. And I feel like there's so much more, and
So much.
this conversation could keep going. And I hope we can do it, more often and keep connecting, because I think we'll help each other open up our own minds further.
Absolutely. I think, and it's poignant, just where we're from right now in this time, it's poignant we do this.
Yeah.
It's important. So take care of yourself, and I look forward to circling back and chatting with you again.
Yes, absolutely. Take care.